Guys, one of the biggest shocks of the Ukraine conflict has been that Ukraine now appears to be a more mechanized force than the Russians. This is crazy because when they started, Ukraine was outnumbered like 10 or 15 to 1 in terms of tanks and APCs. So we've got some leaked footage of Ukrainian armored forces putting those into action, and we are going to see just how much Ukrainians armed forces have evolved in terms of combined arms warfare, integrating tanks and infantry. Let's get into it. Now, some of these, of course, this comes to us from the Sun, which leaks to us from, it looks like the unit itself. There's a few parts that I'm probably going to censor. Don't worry, YouTube censors. You don't have to demonetize this one. As always, guys, also got to say that the combat videos that YouTube won't let me show you, which is a lot of them, they are on the Patreon. I do all the breakdowns every Friday of all the viral combat videos that I can't put here on YouTube. So definitely check the link in the description. Okay, so right there we've got what looks like a BMP. Well, it has a, well, is it a BMP? I'm not sure. Okay, so this is also pretty fascinating. I want to look at this convoy real quick, and I've actually run very similar convoys in Afghanistan where you would have, in our case, it was the Afghan army in Humvees, and we would have our MRAPs. So MRAPs are wheeled vehicles, or sometimes called armored cars in older doctrine, but they behave similar to APCs, right? Where we would have some of our dismounted troops, they themselves would be a fighting position. And they would be just much, much more armored. And this is how more or less we would structure them. We would integrate our convoys. We would actually do every other convoy. I guess I can probably talk about this now because the war is over, but we would use what they call ECMs, systems we'd have these systems that would block cell phone detonated IEDs. They were cell phone jammers. And the cell phone jammers would only work with a bubble. So you would actually want to space your convoy in a really specific way to ensure that there was a continuous bubble and that someone trying to detonate an IED with a cell phone, the signal would always be blocked. So we would actually alternate between the Afghan vehicles who didn't have these devices and US vehicles that did, in such a way that they would be protected by our systems. Now, this was because we really trusted that unit to not, well, betray us. Obviously, the Ukrainians don't have this problem. This looks like all the same unit. In fact, you can see that they have tagged their vehicles with tape. And this is also neat because if you're a commander looking at this convoy from a drone, you would actually see your, I'm going to say, let's say this was meant to be for this operation, ninth axis of advance, or the ninth, the ninth company. You would get to see their progress in real time by just looking at this convoy through your drone. And you can see that the Ukrainian flags also help for friend and foe identification. It's not morale. It's so that aircraft overhead or other advancing forces, because this appears to be, again, part of maybe a multi-pronged advance. You can see here that this looks like it's taking place in the fall. So this is probably a few months old, right? Here's some crops, looks like sunflowers that don't look like they've been harvested, but it looks like it's probably a few months after the harvest. So it makes me think that, yeah, fall time frame. But you can see they've got their friend or foe identification. You can see here that in addition to these unarmored civilian vehicles, you have APCs. Let's back it up just a couple. These APCs really crowded with soldiers. I'm actually sort of surprised that they think that soldiers sitting atop this APC is better than being in vehicles. I actually would prefer to be in a civilian vehicle like this and disperse my troops, because this, like, if they hit a mine, these troops are all getting cooked. They're all done, right? Whereas at least if you're in a vehicle, one, the armored vehicles are going to set off the mines, and these cars you'll disperse your troops, right? So if they get hit, you won't have 8 to 10 troop casualties. You'll have 4 to 6. Okay, here we go. You can see the lead tank. This is also worth noting that the most armored vehicle, the one with the greatest survivability, is in the lead. This is also true of our convoys when we were in Afghanistan. This is because if you hit well, we called them pressure plate IEDs, but they were improvised mines. So if you hit an AT mine, this tank is going to have the best survivability. It's also, you may notice that if this tank doesn't hit a mine, then all the subsequent vehicles in the convoy are almost trying to stay in the tank's tracks. Yeah, you can see even the civilian cars are trying to stay in this exact same tracks. And so you guys can see the danger when I talk about advances being pretty tough. This is what I mean, is that at the end of the day, when you look at an open field, dismounted troops can pass through these open fields fairly easily. But if you want a tank to pass through them, and APCs and civilian vehicles, you really are kind of constrained. You have to stay on these roads to make any real progress. You can see, I think this footage is sped up a little bit. Yeah, you guys can also see this looks like a town that's pretty intact. It looks like the populace is still there. So I suspect these are actually an advance happening from well behind the front lines, and they're moving to the front lines to push through. It could be maybe part of the Kharkiv offensive. That timing seems about right. But you can still see there's a lot of greenery here. And just look at this. This really is a very Soviet way of doing things, is putting all your troops on the outside of an APC. This is an outgrowth, I think, of the Soviet-Afghan War, when it would be the BMPs were so badly designed that oftentimes they would take small amounts of damage, but the troops would be trapped inside. The doors would get warped and jammed shut, for example. And then all of the troops would be killed, despite not having been wounded in the initial strike. So they found that sitting atop the BMPs was actually a better strategy to move troops to and from the battlefield. It was also believed that it would be easier for them to deploy out and engage targets. Of course, at this point, you're like, well, why armor the vehicle at all if you're just going to sit outside of it? And to that I say, indeed, you should just ride in a Forerunner at that point, which is, if you look at what... for example, special forces teams, even a lot of our Afghan National Police allies, that's often what they would do. They would sit in the beds of pickup trucks, because if you're going to be sitting in the open air, you might as well just sit in the air of the Ford Rangers we used to issue them. Yeah, you guys can see, like, I understand this is faster to transport, and if you're not in a combat zone and you reasonably don't think that you're going to have enemy contact, this is probably fine. Like, it's better than marching, it's saving energy. But again, the closer you get to the front lines, the more devastating a single well-placed or lucky shell or artillery strike or anti-tank mine will be. Okay, you can see here, likelihood of contact somewhat increased. They've dismounted, and they are beginning to sweep on either side. You notice they're sweeping on either side of the road. And this is, I believe, probably to clear this area, right? Likelihood of enemy contact is greater. And so these guys are sweeping the road to make sure that probably Russian anti-armor teams or mining teams aren't emplacing anything on this roadway. It's paved, so it would be hard to emplace a mine, an anti-tank mine. I also want to point out that this is not a good formation in this sort of area. Yes, it's not really built up enough for it to be a Ranger file. You want to be spread out quite a bit more so that one hand grenade can't take out more than one or two people. And you want to be sort of staggered, have every other, so, you know, be staggered every other, so that if you're, let's say, a machine gunner right here, right, you would line up your shot on this individual, and it would pass through, and you would easily be able to engage all of these soldiers. This is just a fairly basic movement formation, and it makes me think that maybe these guys are like TDF units or something. Yeah, look at how close they are. This is just not sound tactically. these guys are a little better. You can see the point man, he's properly spaced out, but then these guys are all bunched up. And it's, I feel for them. It's hard. Terrain is terrain, and there's a natural ebb and flow to how close, right? You get closer and more dense, the more developed and urban an area becomes. But this is not that. This is like a walking path in a park. This is the place where your formation should be perfect. Okay, this is actually really interesting. Again, probably in the fall, and you can see, you know, there's a tank here and that it hasn't moved because look at this. They've flattened all of the grasslands here, meaning that why would you, the tank isn't actually concealed from overhead observation because it's clear that the tank is located right here. Yep. Okay. So it's telling you that it's about to explode. We're gonna pause it real quick. There you go. It's just the tank firing. But YouTube has cracked down on this a lot. You can see. Oh no! I can't show this. It's not that dramatic. It's a compilation of the tanks firing and them. They hit something. It's not really clear, and then it's a BMP exploding. It's them hitting Russian targets and the Russian targets like blowing up. But it's tiny, quick clips, so it's not really all that interesting. Let's see if we can move forward a little bit. Oh, well, this isn't interesting at all. Okay, the remainder of the clips are actually just drones dropping munitions. It's not really a cohesive story of that advance resulting in these attacks, which always sort of bothers me when these sort of understand the power of like motivation compilations and like cool footage, combat footage spliced together. But it's still pretty cool. Anyway, guys, I hope you got value out of that because the real value, of course, is in the tactics and techniques and the way they integrate with their armored forces. And I hope you guys saw more than anything else how when you have infantry, and good armored forces, when they work together, they protect each other and make each other so much more effective. It's hard to stop when you have air, ground, light infantry, and armor forces working together. It's a tough nut to crack. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for you. Be sure to check out the Patreon. Link is in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next one.